Back when I was a pastor at a previous church, we had gone on a missions trip to LA, to Skid Row. And this was years ago, before Skid Row is as bad as it is today. We did some ministry, did an outreach, presented the gospel, and there was one man that came to the service, and he had shared with us through tears and everything. He really enjoyed what we had done, but he was lamenting that his life, that he told me that he had just got out of prison. He was already an older gentleman, but he was sad and regretting that so much of his life had been spent away and apart from Christ. And he was just so regretful of how much time he had wasted before he had come to know Jesus, and just sad and couldn't get over the fact that he had wasted so much of his life. I was overwhelmed just listening to him talk, but after a few minutes I prayed and I was like, God, what do I say to this guy? And this passage came to mind that I had been studying fairly recently, and it was this. It's Acts 17:26. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God, and perhaps feel their way towards him and find him. Yet he is not actually that far from any of us. So I pointed this verse out to the man, commenting that Jesus reaches out to us where we are. God reaches out to us in the situations that we are in. It is not so much that you and I have these circumstantial barriers that are in place because of our situations, that until we overcome them, i.e. get out of prison or whatnot, we can have an encounter with God. In fact, I was pointing out that this verse seems to indicate that God is the one who set the boundaries for our life. He's the one not only set the timing of our life, but he put the location where we would dwell, saying that he's not actually that far from us, but it seems to be that he's put us in the best possible situation to respond to him. So God sets the stage. He's the one who lines up all of the cones for us to, the pins for us to knock over. And the question is not, will we ever do it? It's he's the one orchestrating everything to get us to that point where we will. So I want to just read a couple more scriptures. This is Proverbs 16:9. The heart of man plans his ways, but the Lord establishes his steps. John 6:44. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent him draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. Ephesians 4:8. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is a gift from God, so that no man may boast. It's not the result of works. So what this means is there isn't really the situation of many people ask the question, what about the poor, tribesman or whatever on the other side of the world who hasn't had an opportunity to reach God? And this is saying there isn't really that situation. I mean, people might currently be in that circumstance where they don't know, or they aren't even contemplating how they would come to know God. But this verse is implying that God is the one who set the boundaries. He's the one who set them in the place where they would dwell, so that they would respond to him. Whether this is a man trapped in prison, unaware of the gospel, or some sort of person on an island on the other side of the world. And this is not to introduce deterministic language. This is merely to imply that God is always in the background, at hand, working, even if we can't see it, even if we don't understand, and even if we were from the outside to look at a situation and be like, I don't know how God is possibly doing anything in that situation. This is just to say that God has orchestrated and set up this world, and that he can dip his hand in and interact with us when he sees fit. And so part of the idea is, I like to believe that I'm in the best possible situation to have responded to God, and so are you. I like the idea that perhaps if my situation was different, sometimes we wish that it was different and we desire to change it, perhaps I wouldn't have responded to God. If I lived in the Hamptons and had a cushy life, perhaps I would have never recognized my need for the Lord. Or if I was raised in a third world country, perhaps I would have simply followed the culture and not come to know Jesus. Or if I was born in England, perhaps I would just be too impressed with my own accent and not bother with the things of faith. Maybe I would have been distracted by my own situation. And that's not to say people in those situations have those same barriers. It's just for me to lament my situation and to wish that it was changed in those other circumstances could be a barrier. So God has placed me in my own. He has placed me in my situation. People that are in those situations are not barriers because God has placed them there. And that's really what the point of this passage is saying. So what this means is I shouldn't lament or be down on myself because of the situation that I'm in. I should recognize instead that perhaps you or I or that person that we're so concerned about is just one small prayer away from actually encountering God, actually reaching out to Him, because as God says, He is right there with us. Another great thing about this is then I can therefore view my own path. I can look back, as they say, hindsight is 20/20. I can look back on my own journey, my own path, and not be just torn up about it. I can look and say that was part of the important journey to get me to the place where I am today. That is part of my story. That's an essential element, perhaps, of bringing me to the faith, and that puts it all in a new light. So I can acknowledge that my today is better because of my yesterday. In that same story that I said at the beginning, after that, the man was drawn to tears because he was excited that he didn't have to then turn around and look at his life and just be full of remorse and regret. He could look at it and be like, yeah, that was actually an important part of my journey. And furthermore, he was excited that God had been along with him throughout the whole thing until he was ready to respond. It's like that poem, The Footsteps in the Sand. We're able to look at that and say, God, where were you? And the idea is He was there right alongside of us. We just didn't realize it at the time. He was drawing us closer to Him until the point we were ready to respond in faith. And the point is, God is not kind of in the background on the other side of my problems and my issues, waiting for me to sort out my life before He can come and get involved. The point is, He's graciously drawing you and I to Himself now. He is not waiting for you and I to get our lives straight before He gets involved. Instead, God, is the title of this one, God hits us where we live. He pursues us where we are. He doesn't wait until we are perfect. And that doesn't mean there's not a lot of heart work to happen in the meantime. He has to scrape out and remove many things from our own lives. But He is actively pursuing us in the now. So when we look in the mirror, we should say, well, this is who I got to be, right? This is where God has placed me. This is my situation. This is who I am. And so what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Hopefully, as we encounter God, He will help us answer that question. So as we wrap this one up, I just wanted to leave us with a quote from J.R.R. Tolkien from The Lord of the Rings. And this is the scene where Frodo and Gandalf are sitting in the cave and they've just entered into the Mines of Moria and they're trying to figure out which direction to go. So Frodo says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish that none of this had happened." And Gandalf responds, "So do all who live in such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil." And that's for us to remember. There are other forces at work in the world besides just all of the badness and the challenging, even this coronavirus right now. There are other things at work in the world. And God is doing something and He's bringing us to that conclusion. So thanks. I hope this helps. God hits us where we live and He doesn't wait until we're ready for Him in that perfect state for Him to intervene. God is pursuing us now. So thanks for watching Soapbox Theology and hanging out with me a little bit here today. Hopefully that helped and encouraged your walk with God. Continue to preach the gospel and spread the good news. Thank you so much. Comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff and all that jazz. Have an awesome day.